Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia Tzadi Beis, Bava Metzia 92. We're going to start with the Mishnah on Tzadi Beis, Amud Aleph 92a. Daf Yomi is dedicated for a Shmir for Am Yisrael, Hatzah for the Shvuyim, Yeshua for the Chayalim. The Daf Yomi, the Mishnah tells us, Ochel Polo Kishus Afil B'dinar. And what this means is that the worker is allowed to eat a cucumber while he's working, even if it costs as much as a dinar, even if it's a very expensive cucumber. The kosev has, he's allowed to eat a date, afilu b'dinar, even if the date is worth a dinar, even if it's a very expensive date. So Rabbi Elazar Chasma says that a worker is not able to eat more than he's being hired for. Meaning to say, he can't eat more than he's producing. That's the upshot of what that means. And Rashi says, we learn it out from the word kenavshecha. They say even though it's technically permitted to eat as much as you want, but they teach the person, they teach the person not to be gluttonous. Yes, sosim as a pesach pefanav. They teach him not to be gluttonous. And then if that will happen, if he'll be gluttonous, the Bava Metzia will close the door in front of him. This could also be a reference to our relationship with God. There are many things that are allowed, but we shouldn't be a rabta, we shouldn't be gluttonous, and then our Bava Metzia, our employer, will close the Pesach to Hashem from in front of us. Chachamim, so the Gemara asks the following question. Chachamim hainu tanakama, hold on one second. So what's the difference between the Chacham and Tanakama? They both allow the worker to eat, as much as he wants. Whereas says one distinction between them is that it says that the Chachamim teach him not to be that way. The Tanakama say you don't have to, or maybe you're not allowed to teach him because it depends. That the Torah says you're allowed to do this, so why should we teach him not to do it? According to Rabbanan, Islam, the rabbis say you're supposed to teach him. Alternatively, the distinction is Ika Benau to Rav Asi. Distinction between them is the position of Rav Asi. The Amar Rav Asi has two statements which we're about to say. Rav Asi says, First statement is Rav Asi said, even if he was only hired to pick one cluster of grapes, we hired him only to pick one cluster of grapes, he's allowed to eat it. And the second statement of Rav Asi is the second statement of Rav Asi is even if they only harvested one cluster of grapes, he's able to eat it. So the distinction between them is the position of Rav Asi. Rashi has a line which our Gemara doesn't have, that, and we'll have to read the Rashi. Rashi says that Tanakama agrees with the statement of Rav Asi, presumably the Chachamim don't. And this is what the Tanakama says. I'm reading from the Rashi. Tanakama says that the polo ochol kishus, that the worker can eat a cucumber, shehi levada, even if it's by itself and there's no other cucumber. And even if the cucumber is worth a lot of money. And Rabbi Elazar comes to say whether it's by itself or he was hired to pick it and its other cucumbers. If it's more than his wages, he can't eat it. And the Rabbanan say, and the Rabbanan at the end, the Chachamim, their position is that if it's worth more than he's hired to pick, then he's allowed to eat it if he's a day worker. But if he was hired just to pick this cucumber, then they don't agree with Rav Asi. So that's the dispute. The Chachamim say if he was a hire just for this job, they don't agree with the statement of Rav Asi. Why do we need both statements of Rav Asi? Back to the Gemara. Because if we only had the first statement, again, the first statement says they hired him just to pick this cucumber. Rav Asi allows you to pick it. If we only had that statement, that would say, that I would say under those circumstances, that it wouldn't be allowed, I might have thought it's not allowed because it would have said you have nothing to actually do your job. They would say first put it in and then eat it, because if he because once he puts it in, he can't eat it, and the Torah allows you to eat it. So therefore, I might have thought that for sure under those circumstances you could do it, because once he puts it in, he's not going to be able to eat. So therefore, yes, we not but where he could put it in to the kelev of the balabayas, then I might have thought then first put it in and then eat it, meaning stay where it's possible to do. But in a case where it's not possible to uphold it in the end, excuse me, but if they only told us the case where he would have been able to fill it in the end, then under those circumstances, so therefore you need both cases. Because in one case, you would have said, as Rashi says, we'll read the Rashi again, because in the first case, he's never going to be ever able to put it into the utensil of the balabayas. So therefore, the name way that we would say to him, Hav Beresha, first put it in, and then eat it. The because if he put it in Sulo, so I would have thought that under those circumstances, he'd be allowed to eat it because that Torah the Torah allows you to eat it. But where but in the end, in the case where he would not be able to uphold it in the end, I might have said the Torah only allows you to eat it in a case where you actually put it into the balabayas. So therefore, I might have thought that in the latter case you wouldn't be able to eat it. So therefore, we need both cases of Ravasi. The same alternative answer is Ika Benayu de Rav. That alternative answer is based upon something that Rav taught. Rav Matzasi Megillah Sesarim Be'Rebechia. Rav says, I found this scroll called the Megillah Sesarim in the Academy of Rebechia. We had learned a few days ago that Rebechia was the one, says it twice in the Shas, that he would go around and teach Torah to everybody, and he would write the Torah himself, and and he would grow the seed and sew it together and make the nets and trap the deer and then kill the deer, feed it to orphans. But Rebbe Chia also wrote down the oral law for himself, and he hid it because you weren't allowed to write the oral law and teach from it, and that was called the Megillah Sesarim. So Rav found this Megillah Sesarim in the yeshiva of Rebbe Chia, and he looked it up, and it said in it, because of Isi ben Yehuda Omer, Ki Tava B'Kerem Reyecha, that when it says in the pasuk, when you come into the vineyard of your friend, Bevias Kol Adam HaKos Medaber. So that means to say, even if he's not working, Isi ben Yehuda said, you could come into your friend's vineyard and eat. Rav, Isi Chayil Chol Birya. And Rav says, you're going to allow anybody to come into somebody else's field and eat. Nobody's going to be able to live. You're just going to take the other person's food. And Amar Rav Ashi, Amrisla Lishmaita Kamei Rav Kahana. And I said this teaching of Isi that you could go into your friend's vineyard and eat. And I said this teaching of Rav, who said, what are you talking about? That nobody can live. And I said this in front of Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana said, Delma ba'osim b'sudasam da'avdo ba'achlo amar. Maybe he's talking about a case where people come in and then they work for you. Maybe that's what he's talking about. It's not just anybody off the street wants to eat. It's anybody off the street comes in and works for you, and then they can eat. Amar li, and then Rav Kahana responded to me, even that case is ridiculous. A person prefers that his own workers come in and work for him, not that other people he doesn't know show up and start working for him. So the Tana Kama does not, Rashi again fills it in because this is again not exactly in the not exactly in our text of the Gemara. So according to Rashi's version, and the Rashi has a different version. The Rashi's version is that the Tana Kama does not agree with Isi because it says a worker can eat, and so therefore only a worker can eat. But the Rabbanan Basrai, they agree with Isi, and this is what they say: the Chamim allow you to eat if your work, meaning to say that even if he was not hired by you, you could eat. So meaning to say that they allow easy statement, because the way they read it is they allow you to eat more than your work. So even if you're not an actually hired worker, you can also eat. But the Rush says it's the opposite. That he says that the Chachamim are the one who say you can't eat, and the initial Rabbanan say you can eat, because the Rush always paskins like the final Chachamim. Okay, so now we're back to the Gemara. Gemara asks a fundamental question. Poel, so this worker who's allowed to eat, what's the nature of the food that he's eating? We're going to spend the rest of the daf on this question. Is the worker eating from basically his own money or from heaven? Means say that which he eats, is it part of his salary, its expectation? These are the benefits of the job, or is it just a gift from Shemayim, just like the Shemayim gives like gifts to people who are poor or acts of kindness, and maybe it's not part of his salary, it's just a gift from Shemayim. So this is also a fundamental question about us in life. When we're eating, or Mishal Shemayim, are we eating on our own or from heaven? So my nafkamina, why do we need an answer to this question? So I'll tell you, nafkamina, says the Gemara, the Amar Tanula Ishti Ubanai. If the guy says, don't give me the grapes that I would normally be allowed to eat on the job, give it to my wife or my children. Now, if he says it's his, then we could give it to the wife and children. If it's just like a gift from heaven to the poor, then the Torah gives it to him, but Torah doesn't give it to his wife and his children. So then he wouldn't be able to give it to them. The Gemara says, okay, let's try and bring a proof. Several attempts from our Mishnah. My first attempt. Tashma ocha pol kishus. The worker can eat a cucumber. Vafil bedinar koseves. Vafil bedinar. Now you can eat a cucumber or a koseves, even if it's worth a lot of money. Now iyamres mishalo ochel. If you say he's eating his own, Oger bedanka achol bezuzah. Would it make sense that if he's hired for a danka, which is a sixth of a zuz, that he's going to eat a zuz, which is way more than that? Elamai, what does it mean? Mishal Shemayim ochel, that he eats from Shemayim as a gift. Well, if that's so isn't that a proof that it's from heaven that he's eating it as a gift? Or says no, sof Oger bedanka achol bezuzah. It's the same idea. Even though he's hired for a danka, heaven's giving him a gift of a zuz. What must you say? The Torah gives him the extra rights. It could be that also here the Torah gives him as part of his salary, so it's not a proof. Tashma, another attempt. Rabbi Elazar Chasma says, Rabbi Elazar Chasma says you can't eat more than your wages, and the Chamim allow it. If he doesn't refer to the case, the Mar Savar Mishal Ochel, Mar Savar Mishal Shemayim Ochel. Rabbi Elazar Chasma says that it's basically he can't eat more than his wages. Rav Elazar Chasma says that Mar Savar Mishalohu Ochel, that Rav Elazar Chasma says he's eating from his own salary, and so therefore he can't obviously eat more than what he's being paid, because the extra cannot be more than the main. And the Chacham Moel would say it's a gift from heaven. Mishal Shemayim Ochel. The Gemara says no. Everybody says it's his wages. We're based upon the fact that the pasuk says you can eat according to your nafshecha, according to your soul. Mar savar kenafshecha bedavar shemoser nafsho alav. That the bedavar shatam, meaning to say it's something that you are willing to risk your life on, meaning you're going to climb up the tree, and so that's a daily worker. And so there, ma nafshecha im chasamta. So therefore, you would be allowed to eat it. Umar savar kinafshacham. Therefore, he's like a worker, and so therefore, it's his own money. Umar savar kinafshacham. Ma nafshacham chasamta poter. Avpol im chasamta poter. So just like a worker, if you just like if you muzzled yourself from eating, you're going to be exempt. You mean you have the permission not to eat. So to the worker, im chasamta, if you say to him, I don't want you to eat, you're pater. And so since this drasha can be expounded in a different way, so therefore we have to use it for another drasha. And so therefore the Torah does not prohibit the worker to eat more than his salary. But according to the first approach, it says kinaf that basically according to the amount of your salary, and that's it. So now we're up to the next attempt. Tashma comes from a Nazir. Nazir, somebody's not allowed to drink the wine or eat the grapes. Nazir Shamar Tanu. If a Nazir says, give it to my wife or my children, in Shomelo, you don't listen to him. That's what the Bryce about a Nazir tells us. Now, the Amr is if you want to say Mishalo that he's eating from his own grapes, Amayin Shomelo, why don't we listen to him? So this proof it's Mishal Shemayim. Gemara says, no, Hasa Mishum. No, there it's a special law of the Nazarite. We want him to not have anything in his household, any grapes, because he might come to violate the prohibition of eating grapes or wine. Another attempt, Tashma, Paul, Shamar, Tanula, Ishti, Ubanai, Ain Shoma. Well, if a worker says, give it to my wife or children, we don't listen to him. And if you say it's his, well, why don't we listen to him? Gemara says, no, it's the same idea that the pole here is a Nazir. My pole, it's a Nazir. So it's talking about a Nazir, and that's why I can't have it in his household. Not because it's part of his salary. So the Gemara says, Vatanya, Nazir, Vatanya pole. But we have one Bryce already that says a Nazir. Why would we need this one as a worker? So it's obviously not a Nazir. So Gemara says, Mide Gavia doesn't tell you they're not. These two Bryces are not next to each other. The Bryce about a pole is written in a different context, but it really refers only to a Nazir. Another attempt. How do we know if the pole says, give it to my wife or children, we don't listen to him? Do not put it in my utensils. If you want to say here also, it's referring to a Nazarite. If that's the case, why would we say the reason is not because Mishum El Kal Yochalo Titain? It's the reason is Mishum Nizirahu. So we see from here that there's another brisa that says you can't give it to your wife and children, and so clearly we that in this case we see clearly you can't give it to your wife and children, so it's not your salary. So the Gemara says no. Inachinami. The Gemara says, okay, I'm going to grant to you that, but that really it should have cited that pasuk. But hachanami Nazir. And here also we're talking about a Nazarite. That's why I can't give it. So why do they cite the pasuk of El Kel Yochal? They should have cited the pasuk of Nazir. Gemara says, Hinachinami, you're right. But since the Brisa mentions a worker, it cites the verse about the worker, but it's really a Nazarite. Another attempt, Tashma, Sochar Sapol Tzos Petain. And let's say you hire the worker to dry out the figs on top of Tzadi Beis and Beis. Hareza Ochal, then the worker is going to be allowed to eat the figs, upater, and he doesn't have to give the meiser because it wasn't yet completed. And the meiser only takes effect once the work is completed. Upater min a meiser. But he says if you hired him on the condition of Menashe Ochal Ani Ubanai, on the condition that I will eat or my children will eat, or that my children will eat as a result of my salary, Huochel Upater, he's allowed to eat and he's exempt because he's eating as part of his job. It's not part of a finished product. Ubeno Ochel V'chayev, but his son is eating and that's his salary, and so therefore the son has to give meiser. The Amris Mishalo Ochel, but if you say that they're eating as a residual of his rights to all the food, Beno Ma'chayev, then why is the son responsible? The son is just eating as a residual of his father's rights to eat when the food is being harvested, even before it's completed. So doesn't this prove it's Mishal Shemayim? The Gemara says, Amaravina Mishum Demirse Kemekach. He says, no, the whole reason why the son has to give Meiser is only because it looks like it's a transaction. So it looks like that since this was part of the stipulation that his son can eat, it looks like it was part of a transaction, and so therefore it looks like it's part of the transaction, and so therefore the son has to give meiser. Another attempt. Tashma sochar sapol asos beneter avai. So let's say you hire the worker to do work on neter avai. Neter avai is the tree in the fourth year that since it was planted, the fruits need to be in Jerusalem, or you could redeem it and bring up the money. So let's say you hire the worker to work on neter avai. then the worker can't eat it because you can't eat this fruit until you bring him to Jerusalem. But if you didn't tell the worker in advance, then we force the owner to redeem it and to allow the worker to eat from the fruits while he's harvesting the field. If you would say it's a gift from heaven, I mean it's not his fundamental right, it's just a gift from heaven. Why do we force the owner to redeem it and allow the worker to eat? It's something that's prohibited. He doesn't have a fundamental right to something that's prohibited. So the Gemara says, no, also mishum the milchzik mekachtos. The reason why we do it is it looks like it's a mistaken sale. It looks like that the owner tricked him. So since it's meaning to say, so therefore, if he hadn't told him this, if he had only told him this, maybe he wouldn't have done the job. So therefore, we force the owner to redeem it. Gemara says, Ema Sefer. What about the next clause there? It says this nisparsu agulin. Or let's say the cake spread apart, or niftachu chaviyosef, or the barrels opened up. Then the worker cannot eat from them. And if you didn't tell him this in advance, because basically on this point, they're completed for their work. So if after they dried out, you completed the work, and then they opened up, you need to go back and press them again. So now you're working on completed work. You can't eat it. Why? Because the worker's not allowed to eat from something that you first need to tithe. So that was completed and tithed. So therefore, back to this case, but if you didn't tell him that it was completed work already, maaser, he has to tithe it, and then you allow him to eat it. If you say his right to eat is not a fundamental right, it's part of his salary, it's from heaven. And why do we have to make the owner tithe it? The Torah doesn't give you the right to eat something which is fundamentally prohibited. And if you want to say, well, hachanami, also in this case, so it looks like the owner tricked the worker. I understand if the figs had spread apart and now he needs to repress them. The guy didn't realize that, and so therefore it was like it's a mistaken sale. But if the barrels opened up, my mekachtos ika. What mekachtos is there if the barrels were opened up? So, meaning to say, once the barrels opened up, that then made the yadi the itbol meiser. He knows already that wine is something that requires to be tithed, and so he knows that he can't eat from it once it's in the barrel, once it was ready to go into the barrel. So at that point, it would be too late for him to eat it anyway. So what's the issue there? So Rav Sheshes, so therefore it's not a mekachtos. So the fact that he can't, why is he allowed to eat it? Doesn't it prove that it's from his salary and not from Shemaim? Rav Sheshes, shenispatchu chavayosef labor. No, it went into the big pit. So he didn't think it was ready to be tithed yet. Gemara says that can't be the case. But Tanya, Yayim Mishiyar Labor, once the wine goes into the big pit, Rabbi Akiva. So once the wine goes into the pit, you have to till the tithe. And Gemara says, no, it's like Rabbi Akiva who says Mishe Yakbe, that it's you don't have to tithe it once it's in the pit, but only once the dregs are floating on the top of the pit. That and it starts to ferment. That's when you have to do the meiser. The Amru. So the Gemara says. So the Gemara gives a different answer. The Amru lay that they said to him. So the Gemara says so. Lo avi yadinan. So basically, the workers say to the Bava Metzia, we didn't know that they had removed the dregs and it's red and it was done. So the Gemara says, well, still, that's also not going to be a sufficient answer. Name a way why the owner could just say, you should have realized that maybe it was ready to be tied at that point. Maybe the dregs had been removed. No, the Gemara says, Dilma. The Gemara says, "Ba'asra dahu gavra the nugget iu makba." No, we're talking about a place where the guy who hires them, the guy who gets hired, it would be his job to drag it out. So he shouldn't have assumed that it would have been filtered out because that would have been his job. Ma'asra the tani Rav Zvid b'dbei Rav Hoshaya, and now the Gemara says, now that Rav Zvid taught in the Academy of Rav Hoshaya, Yayim Mishiyar Labor the Akba, that the wine is completed. That the Tanakama says that the wine it's considered to be it's completed work once it goes into the pit, and you remove the dregs. Rabbi Akiva says it's only when you remove the dregs and put them into the barrels. We could even say that our Mishnah is not talking about a case where you poured it, that where the barrel spilled into the pit, but rather the cover came off, and still it could be a mekach toast. Because the worker could say to the owner, "We didn't know that you already filtered it out, and we thought that our job was to filter it out." So, and what about if the owner responds, "You should have realized that maybe it was already filtered." No, we're talking about a case where the person who closes the barrels, he's the one whose job it is to filter. The Gemara brings an additional proof whether or not the worker eats from his own or from Shemayim. Tashma, it says in the Mishnah, we're going to get to, God willing, tomorrow's daf, Kotetz Adam al Yidei Atzmo, al Yidei Beno Bito Agdolam, that a person is allowed to make a conditional clause with the employer for himself, and he can also make the clause for his children or his adult children. He can make a conditional clause, basically to say that we're not going to eat from the work while we're working in exchange for more money. And he can do this for himself. He can do this for his adult children and for his slaves. Because they have sound mind, so he can make this agreement on their behalf. But he can't make this conditional clause for his minor children, and he can't do it for his minor slaves. Or he can't make this conditional clause about his animals. He can't say, "Pay me more, my animal won't eat," because they don't have any knowledge. So basically, he cannot make a conditional clause for his minor children or his animals that they won't eat. So the Gemara says, the assumption is that what we're talking about is the Ma'al Amazonos. We're talking about a case where the father is providing his minor children with support. Now, so therefore, if you want to say that the rights that he has to eat is a special gift to the poor from heaven, that's why I can't make this conditional clause, because he doesn't have the right to take away from them their gift from heaven for the poor. But if you're saying that it's part of his salary, why can't he make this agreement on behalf of the minors and say, I waive their salary in this respect, and I'll get some more money? So the Gemara says, no, we're talking about a case where he's not supporting them. Well, if he's not supporting them, that's why he can't make the agreement. Well, then how can he make it on behalf of the adults? Gemara says, well, the adults, they are aware and they're waiving their rights. The Gemara says, so the quote say the but don't we have explicit teaching that he can make this condition for his wife, but not for his animal, and for his adult children, but not for his minor children, and he can make it on behalf of his slaves? My love, aren't we talking about a case? Aren't we talking about a case where he's basically supporting them? And this is what the prices are arguing about. And one position is that it's from him, it's part of his salary, therefore he can make the clause, and the other one says it's from heaven and therefore he cannot make the clause. Gemara says no, everybody's saying it's part of his salary. What's the distinction? One is where he's not supporting them, and the other clause is is where the brisa that says he can make it is where he's supporting them. So Gemara says, what are you talking about? What's this case? Where he's supporting them. If that's the case, so why can't he make the clause, since he's supporting the minors, that they're not going to eat this food in exchange for more money? Gemara says, yeah, you have the right to your minor children's money, but you don't have the right to inflict pain upon them because you're supporting them. I'm supporting them, so therefore I'm going to make them work harder and not be able to eat. No, that the Torah does not give you that right. So, okay, we'll have to stop here. I'll pick this up, God willing, tomorrow's daf. If anybody has any questions, happy to address.